Okay, I'm just going to do a short video with an introduction to English paper piecing, and I'm going to show you how you can do this very accessibly, so it means you don't need to have a lot of stuff, or I'm going to show you some of the other things that I quite like to use when I'm doing English paper piecing. So over here I've got a range of different fabrics from my current collection, which I'm just going to kind of like maybe explore a little bit. But essentially these are the key things that you need. You need some templates, you need fabric, you need a needle, and you need some thread. Okay, with those things you can do what's called English paper piecing to create some patterns with different fabrics. Okay, I'm going to show you though what I also use, okay, and maybe a little bit more detail on some of the things quickly, as this is an introduction video. So I'll use a cutting mat. I have my templates and I have my scissors, but also other things that I have are, I personally quite like to use these pens, glue sticks, which are called Soline glue sticks, and they come with glue in them. So it's a fabric glue, so that will wash out once you've finished using it. And they come with refills, so you can just restock or refill your pens. I quite like to use with my cutting mat. I prefer personally to cut my fabrics with a blade rather than scissors. I just find it's a bit more accurate. I've got some little scissors as well that I use. So you can use any needles. The smaller the needle, the finer the work will be, and so the more invisible the stitches will be. I quite like these ones. These are the Tulip Milliner's straw needles, and they're the size 10 needles with the big eye, but there are a whole range of needles out there. Those ones I have and to hand. I've got a ruler. This one is a 1 inch wide ruler by 6 inches long, but it's got really handy 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch markings on it as well, which makes it really easy for when we are cutting edges and borders around our pieces. And then the thread that I use is this, the bottom line, Superior Threads. This is a 60 weight polyester thread, but you can get some really nice cotton threads out there now, which are kind of like an 80 weight. So you can get some really nice fine ones. I personally, with no matter what colour I'm working with, I always use this grey. I just find a mid-tone grey, especially if it's particularly fine. You actually can't usually see the stitches. I'll show you some examples in a minute. Some people, however, prefer to use different colours depending on what colour fabrics they are using. That's a personal preference. And then I also find I quite like to use a thread conditioner. This is called Thread Magic, and you just put your insert your thread in there. So if I do that now quickly, I just put my thread in there, okay, close it, and then I can just pull my thread through that, so that when I go to cut that thread off, it's got the conditioner already on it. And I find that the thread conditioner really helps prevent knotting in the threads as I'm sewing. So those are the key things that I use. Okay, what I'm going to do now is remove some of these things and show you the process for doing the making English paper piecing templates. Okay, so these I'm working towards. Now the same rules and processes apply for whether you're doing hexes or whatever shapes it is. I'm actually doing some kind of quite, I suppose, informal tumbling blocks. So you can see you kind of like make use of having a dark, a mid-tone and a light or a bright element, and it gives off the effect of something which is quite 3D. So which is quite a nice idea of kind of like blocks all coming down together. So again, you can see some more there. Okay, so this is what I'm working towards today and in this video, but as I said, the same rules apply for all of the different elements. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do, okay, is bring our cutting mat back, okay, and we want to cut some fabric to go around our template. Okay, so as you can see on these pieces here that have already been sewn, okay, you can see that the stitches I keep my stitches, that one's coming undone, let's pick a different one. Okay, that's how easily the glue comes undone later on. So lots of people worry about the glue, but actually they come undone really nicely. But you can see there, or you can't see probably, the stitches are really small, really neat, consistent, and actually on the other side of the fabric you can't see how that's happening. But each of these different segments has been wrapped around a piece of card. This can be paper, these can be hand cut, or you can buy them pre-cut as well. And then you will then stitch them together to create your patterns. So we can either cut quite freehand. I like the idea of this being something that's very what's the word? It can be very free form, where you can just kind of like just quite quickly just cut your fabrics just to see how you want this to work, quite roughly. Okay, and then you can start to stitch these down or glue them down, or you can be a lot more accurate with it. So you might want to draw the lines on there for the borders, and then you can then cut them more accurately. Or the quickest way, and the way that I quite like to work, is by, once I've got my piece there, I will use my ruler. In this case, this is an Omnigrid 1-inch ruler, and it's got all of these different markings on. So a 1/4-inch seam is quite a nice one to work with. The bigger the seam you've got, actually the easier it is to do, particularly as a beginner. However, it does mean that you have more bulk and more fabric weight in the work afterwards. Okay, but if you're feeling quite confident with your stitching or your gluing or whatever, then a 1/4-inch seam is absolutely fine. If you want to go a little bit more than a 1/4-inch seam, that's equally fine too. So I'll just take the safety off of my blade there, and then I can rotate this round. Okay, I should have probably put a fresh blade on before I did this demo, but that's still working absolutely fine. And so you can see you can get kind of quite a nice clean edge there. Okay, so that's the process for cutting around your shapes. So you can be quite free form with it, or you can be quite accurate with it. If I move this away now, okay, what I want to do is I'm going to show you now how 2 different methods, okay, for turning the cloth over the edge of the template, so then you can create your different shapes on the other side. Okay, so I'm bringing these 2 here. So one I'm going to glue, and one of them I'm going to do a stitch base. So if you don't have glue handy, okay, you can just use a really small amount of, say, like a glue stick, a school glue stick, or you can use the Soline glue, or other products are available. Or if you don't have the glue available, as I said, there is a way of what's called stitch basting. Okay, so here's one I've done earlier on, and I've used quite a thick dark thread to do the stitch basting on this so that you can see it, but this thread will usually be cut out afterwards. There are sometimes you'll see people will stitch through the card, so that will hold it in place probably a little bit more easily than just putting stitches on the fabric. or to make it a lot easier to pull out later on, you can just pull the card out, and this hasn't, as you can see, been stitched through. But I don't want to remove the card yet because I want to show you how we'll do that once we piece it all together. Okay, so the method I use if I'm doing stitch rather than glue basting is I use a small amount of tape. I've got just some washi tape here in quite a bright colour, so you can just, again, so you can see it. I'm just going to hold down one side, the opposite side to the side I'm going to start to do my stitching on. Okay. What I'm then going to do is I'm going to fold this corner over, and you can do a little bit of a finger press just to hold it a little bit in place. You can see I've got a bit of glue on my thumb there already from a previous piece I was doing. Okay, and what I'm just going to do is hold this corner down, and with my needle and thread, if I get the right one. Okay, so I've got my needle and thread. Again, I'm using a dark thread here so that you can see this quite easily. I'm just going to quickly catch that corner. I've got a really big knot on there. You can pull that away a bit if you want to. I'm just going to do a quick double stitch there, okay? And I haven't gone through the card, I've just gone through the fabric. I'm just going to fold that up to this corner and fold that corner over there. You get these little tails on there. Sometimes when people are first starting out doing this, they'll think they want to get rid of the tails because they're in the way. Actually, do not cut those off. It's really important that you keep those attached. They'll be tucked in on the back of the fabric at the end. Okay. Then I'm going to just nip across to the following corner. Okay. So, which is a bit easier because the tape was holding it down. And so each time I'm just catching both corners of the fabric, just pulling that along there, and I'm just going back to basically just doing a little double stitch on each corner. And then I'm going to come along to this corner, leave the tape there for now, we can take that off in just a second. And then what I'm going to do is just fold the last corner over, come over here and stitch that one. Okay. Now you can do a little knot there if you want to, or I tend to just leave it with quite a tail because I know it's a temporary thing. So I just leave the tail there, and that's that piece done there. Okay. Also, you can then take this bit of tape off and just put that to the side for the next one. Okay, so then you've got one piece done there. And you would do that with all of your pieces ready for you to start to join all of these pieces together. Okay, so that's what's called stitch basting as a method. Okay, I personally though prefer to glue baste all of my pieces, so you can see on these pieces I've previously glue basted that it's just held down, so there's no stitches there. But because this is a special fabric glue, I can actually quite easily stick that for when I want to take these out later on. Okay, so I'm going to get my piece of my template that I'm attaching the fabric onto. Some little bits of fabric on the fibre on there. Okay, so I'm just going to place this in here. I always, whenever I do whatever pieces I'm doing, whether they're hexagons, diamonds, triangles, squares, I always try to start in the same place so that when all of the pieces are finished, all of these little tails, or the hats, like the wizard hats, are all pointing in the same direction for all of your pieces, so that when you then go to piece them together, they do slot in together a lot more easily, like so. Okay, so you can see on the back there, they're all folded in exactly the same direction. So for me, whenever I start diamonds, I always start in the top right side. So I'm just going to just apply a small amount of glue, and let me use these scissors just to show. Okay, what I want to try to not do is get glue right along the edge here, okay, because when this fabric folds over and when we start to stitch them together, if that is glued down onto the card, it just makes it a little bit more difficult and sticky to stitch it together. So actually what I want to do is try to create a relatively thin line of glue that's just away from the edge, but enough to catch the fabric onto this card. Okay, I'm not particularly neat and accurate with this. I often will be quite clumsy and might go too close to the edge, so you can see, I don't know if you can see that on camera. Because the glue comes out, it's a slightly different colour, so this is a blue one. You can see where the glue line is immediately. As it starts to dry, it disappears to be clear. So I can just glue that edge down there, okay, and then I can just go along. So I've got my glue line, just a quick line of glue going down there, going a bit close to the edge there. If you're doing this in the summer or somewhere hot, okay, or if your pen has got particularly hot, the glue can get quite soft. So some people, I'm in Yorkshire, so it doesn't usually get that hot. Some people in hotter places and climates and spaces will keep their glue sticks in the fridge, so then they're a bit easier to handle. Got lots of bits coming off there. So I can now fold that over. Okay, and that's done there. So you can see we've got, even though we've stitch based and we've glue based different ones, because we did this in the same order, it means that our tails are all going in exactly the same direction each time. Okay, so it doesn't matter which direction they're going, so long as you have it's doing it repetitively the same each time. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is show you how to stitch your pieces together. So what I'm going to do is just drag some different pieces in here. So I'm going to make one piece which is going to be done with one kind of stitch, okay, and then I'm going to do another one which is a different kind of stitch. So I'll do this one with what I call what is called the flat back stitch. That's my preference, but sometimes you'll see people, and some people prefer to do what's called a whip stitch. So I'm going to first of all show you how to do the whip stitch, and then I'm going to show you how to do the flat back stitch. Okay, I find I'm not neat enough with the whip stitch, and so you can often see the stitching on the other side a little bit, and I like to not be able to see the stitches on this side. If you're not bothered about seeing them, or if you're a lot neater than I am, then this is perfectly fine. Okay, and this is the process often when you see this on films, this is the process that you'll see people doing. So I've threaded up my my thread, my needle, with my quite fine thread here. Okay, so what I'm just going to do, okay, is just fold these back on each other. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do a little whip stitch that goes along there. Okay, to start it off, I tend to take my needle under the fold that we've got here. Okay, I take it up to the corner point, which I'm doing at a funny angle because of the camera. Okay, and I pull that through. Okay, and then going to go and catch my other fabric over here. So let's bring this up to the camera, so hopefully you can see what I'm doing here. Okay, and I'm just going to catch that, sorry, go up through that way, that's better. Catch that through there. So hook it over that little tail. Okay, and I'm going to do one more stitch in about the same spot. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is at the start and end of each piece that you join together, I prefer to put a small knot in place so that if I don't know, I might have spent a year piecing lots and lots of things together, I might have just spent an afternoon, whatever happens, if one of them later starts to, the stitch breaks, it's only going to unravel as far as that, whereas if they're all joined together and there's no knots, it could pull the whole piece apart. So I tend to kind of go back in for my second stitch, and then I do what's called a knicker knot. Okay, so I have my needle is gone through both fabrics. I think I might have just missed the edge of that grey one there. Okay, or pulled it back out. There we go. Just stop it from hooking on the tail there. There we go. Okay, so so my needle is in there. Okay, I'm going to take the end that's currently in the fabric, and I'm going to wrap that around the back of the needle, and then the tail, which is actually attached through the eye of the needle, I'm going to hook around the other way around the back of the needle. Okay, and then when I pull that through, that gives me a little knot that holds that all in place there, so that won't come undone now. So now I can just go along and I can just do a regular little stitch coming through here. The glue's come undone on that one because I glued that one up quickly. Okay, and I'm just going to, about every couple of millimeters, I tend to do a stitch. Some people do them more regularly. I've seen some people talk about doing 16 stitches per, 12 to 16 stitches per inch. And sorry, I keep jumping between millimeters or centimeters and inches here. Okay. So quilting tends to talk in inches, but as I'm in England, we often talk in millimeters as well. So for those of you who aren't conversant in inches so much, so just going to go along there. When I'm doing this, I don't know if this is picking up on the camera, I'm just picking up a few threads from each side. Okay, I'm not gouging through the card, I'm just skimming between the edges of the fabric and the card. I'm just going to whiz along to the end here. I really enjoy doing this in an evening, and I might have the radio on, or I might have something on the television going on in the background while I'm doing this. But I sometimes I get quite into doing this and can spend hours whiling away the time and my thoughts doing this, but I can sometimes get a bit of a neck ache. So aside from getting up about every 20 minutes and stretching out, I have heard, and I've been trying out recently, it seems to be working actually, making sure I've got my feet up while I do this, and it helps keep my neck and back in a better position for doing this. Okay, now I've gone through and I've done this pretty quickly, so I would have probably put in a few more stitches, but for the sake of this video, I am just going to whiz along to the edge there, and then as I get to that last couple of stitches, I'm just going to catch that corner if I can. Yeah, and I'm just going to do one more knicker knot. So I take this edge of my thread, wrap it around the back of my needle, and then I take the end that's in the needle still and take that around the back of the needle, and then I pull it through, just creates a little knot there. And there you go. And actually, can't really see the stitches. So quite pleased with that. Normally on mine you can when I do this process. And then what I would do is when I want to put in my next piece, okay, I would start by joining this one on here, okay, and I would do another knicker knot in this corner here, okay. So as I said, at the start and end of each piece, sometimes it can seem a bit annoying to have to kind of do that, and you think, oh, it'd be so much quicker if I should just carry on with my sewing. But if this was to fall apart, it would be a lot more work and time to fix it. So I could just then carry along the edge of these two pieces here. Just catch this here. And I would sew all the way along to there, put in my knot there, and then once I have attached that, okay, I would want to attach this piece to this one. So what I would then do is fold that one down. So I would, because these would be joined, they're not at the moment, I would fold this in half, okay, so that that was joined there, and then I could then sew those two pieces together, okay. So that's how you would do it with a whip stitch. What I'm going to show you now is how I would do this with a flat back stitch, which, as I said before, is actually my preference. So I'm just going to quickly cut this off so that I can show you the other way of doing it, okay. So with a flat back stitch, I do something slightly differently. So first of all, just put my knot to my thread for in a second, okay. I don't know if you can see on here, I'm going to tape this one up over here, okay, is I use a bit of magic tape. So it's just got some kind of see-through tape here for the sake of this workshop, so you can see what I'm going to do. I'm going to use some washi tape. So what I would do is I would attach my pieces in a flat way, okay. So this does use a bit more tape, or a lot more tape, because the other one method doesn't use any tape, okay. And then what I can do is I can then stitch that in a flat way, and personally I prefer to do this. I don't have to do any folding, so if I've got quite thick card, then that can sometimes get in my way. I personally prefer to do this method. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in, I can either come in under there, or I can just nip in there. So I just catch that, the corner of my diamond there. Okay, so the knot is sitting inside there, and I'm just going to catch that corner across there. Okay, and what I'm going to do is then I'm just going to do a stitch going across there and across there. So I've just picked up on a few threads on each side, and again I'm still going to do that knicker knot. So I can take that one around the back of the needle, I'm going to take this one around the back of the needle, the opposite direction, and then when I pull my thread through, there you go, you can see this is just caught there, okay. You can sew towards yourself, but actually I find that I get less arm ache if I sew away from myself, okay. And you may find that you have different preferences. So I'm just catching a couple of threads on one side and then a couple of threads on the other side, and it's just going to sew straight across there. And if I haven't put glue too close to the edge, then that's quite easy, just to pick up a few threads there and a few threads there. Okay, so that is the flat back stitch. Just making sure I don't catch the card. And that goes all the way up there. Okay. So once I get up to there, I would do my knot, and then I would bring my next piece in, and I would just tape that in place there and there. I can usually find that I can reuse the tapes several times before I have to discard them, and then I can then just stitch. I usually cut the thread off once I've finished there, and then I would then come down and do a single line all the way along there, okay, with a knot, again, just where I'm joining the corners, okay. One thing I didn't show you in the last example when I was doing the whip stitch actually is how to finish it off slightly more neatly so that you haven't got lots of bits of thread everywhere. Now I'm going to just show you how to do this before I finish getting to the end of this sample, okay. So let's say, for example, I've got to the end here, okay. I'm just going to catch a couple more pieces there, okay. I would do my knot at the end, okay. Let's pretend we're at the end, okay. So that's all tied off, okay, nicely all the way to the end. And then what I would then do is actually I'd just go back under the fabric a little bit. So I haven't gone through the paper or the card. I've just caught the fabric. I'm going to pull my needle up through there, okay, pull it along, and then, I don't know if you can see this. Sorry, I've got very short nails at the moment. Okay, I can then just cut my thread where it comes out of the fabric, and so the tail where you've done the sewing is completely all hidden inside there. And when we remove the tape, obviously I didn't sew all the way to the end, but you can there again see we've got a very kind of like neat finish there. Okay, so one last thing to show you on this supposedly quick video, okay, is what happens once you've sewn them together and what happens to the card, okay. So as I was showing you earlier on, there was one that was the glue had already started to come undone, okay, which isn't necessarily a problem, they can fall out. Once you have sewn all of these pieces, and then you've sewn all of these pieces themselves, the shapes together to create whatever pattern it is you want. So I would sew those together in the same way as I'd sewn those together, okay. Once you've done this, okay, once you've got something once one of the pieces is completely surrounded by card all the way around, you can then start to remove the pieces of card, and you can reuse them as much as you like, or quite a lot of times. I tend to reuse mine. I haven't actually, I don't think I've thrown any away. I keep reusing them, and the card just comes out really easily. If you've actually finished the piece and it's ready to be quilted or appliqued onto another fabric, or some backing, then you can take all of the other pieces out. Personally, I would actually iron this first, and actually once it gets a bit warmer, then the glue becomes even easier to kind of like unpiece if you're having problems with it. Not that I've ever had problems with it, and it also just holds these in place when you're ready to then applique them down onto a backing fabric. And that, I think, is the end of my tutorial. Okay, I do teach this as classes as well, where we go into a lot more detail and developing our own patterns for doing English paper piecing, but just to get people kind of going and seeing what English paper piecing is all about, then and just showing you how accessible and simple this all actually is, then I think that video should do the job.